Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Solid topic for you today. Let's learn. What's a time that you've feared for your life, and why? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. 7.2 earthquake in Japan made the apartment I was in wobble like jello. Tried to stand up in my chair and walk away from the window, ended up crawling away and having a small bookcase spill my books on me. Spent a few seconds leaning against the inside wall, sliding door closet, looking at the ceiling, and having a very vivid picture of being crushed to death by collapsing concrete and debris. Slept outside for 2 nights after evacuating. Apartment did not even have a crack in it. 10 out of 10. Would recommend Japanese government housing. I wrote about this in another post, but I lived with my abusive ex for about a year because I ran away from my dad's side of the family, which was also abusive sexually. When I went to live with my mom, she said the apartment was too small for the both of us, and that I could stay with my boyfriend in public housing because she wasn't used to dealing with me as an adult. The last time I lived with her, I was 7 years old. My ex's anger definitely went up several levels during our relationship. It started by him pushing me when he was upset. Then he would be upset at his mother and throw glass and yell. We had one scary situation where he actually lifted the stove from the hinges because he was so upset at his mother for asking him to clean. One day, I came back to his house and I noticed his apartment door was still open. His mother was crying, and as I peeked through the door, I saw him standing there with a large knife close to her neck. I immediately pushed him and asked him what his issue was, and told him it was nuts to be that upset. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Oh, you want to be involved? I'll make sure you're involved today." He chased me to his bedroom. I locked the doors. He knocked it down and proceeded to punch me like a boxer. At some point, I dropped, and thankfully when I woke, the phone had dropped close to me, and I was able to call 911. He was in the other room slapping his mother apparently. 911 came and took me in an ambulance. I had 2 kidney contusions and 2 broken fingers. That night haunted me for years and still gives me chills. I was rafting. Our supplies and cooler were tied down. The cooler got dislodged on a rock when we capsized, and my left leg got tangled up in its rope. I was being dragged down by the weight of the now water-filled cooler, which was also tangled in a submerged tree. Nobody could swim the current to me. I luckily had a knife on my hip and had to submerge myself under to cut the rope. We were hungry that night, but I was lucky as hell to be alive. It's always a good thing to carry some type of small knife when you're camping or in the wilderness. I have one whenever I camp, and even my son has one now, so he's learning. Good job. I used to work security at a hospital. About 2 a.m., walking around with my partner trying to stay awake, we see a man in the fairly dark parking lot at the back of the hospital. As we get closer, we notice that he's holding a large knife, chef's knife, that is covered with blood. He starts to move toward us, knife in hand. We both start backing up and yell at him to drop the knife. The moment between us noticing the knife and yelling at him was the closest I've come to fearing for my life. Right before we radioed for the police, he stopped moving toward us and slowly put down the knife. As we approached, we noticed that the blood was from self-harm. We applied pressure to the wounds and brought him into the emergency department. There were many holy shit moments in that job, but that was the only time I feared for my life, if only for a few seconds. Wasn't the only time or most frightening time, but the most memorable was when I was a teenager and got pinned to a wall by an extremely agitated cow. She'd knocked her water bucket apart, and I was replacing it, and she charged me. I just happened to fit exactly in between the horns. I do mean exactly. I had matching bruises on each side like I'd been hit twice with a length of pipe. She hit hard enough to drive her points a couple of inches into the wall and stick. I've been in car accidents, fallen off things, been in fights, and even had a young tree fall on me. None of that compares. Felt like being caught by a huge wave. Anyway, I bonked her as hard as I could on the forehead and bolted out the door when she pulled her head back. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds, tops. Best part? My parents were right outside. They thought I'd just been killed. The wall was solid for the first 4 feet, then 2-inch gaps between 2x8 boards for the rest. They saw the whole thing but couldn't see me below my shoulders, just the charge, the catch, and the wall crack from the impact and the horns pushing through. As teens, 14 to 15, friends and myself had a random creepy dude walk up on us at my neighbor's house while having a sleepover. Her driveway was super long, and we lived in the middle of nowhere. The day my uncle attacked my mom, and then later that night came to my parents' house with the intent of killing everyone that left the home. He did succeed in taking my brother from us. Then we all had to be under police protection at my mom's hospital room until they found my uncle. This is like medical related, not a situation like in most other replies. So basically, one day 2 years ago, I started noticing some really odd symptoms I had that resembled a UTI, which I never had before, but I kinda had this gut feeling it was more than that, even though the symptoms were subtle, so I told my parents immediately. I woke up the next morning at 5 a.m. with the sharp pain in my bottom right side. Oh, maybe it's a cramp. I use the bathroom and try to get back to sleep, but the pain starts growing, so much it feels like a stabbing pressure. I toss onto my side. The pain is still fully there. I go on my stomach, still fully there. I sit up, walk around, do any position possible, and the pain is only getting worse, and at this point, like 15 minutes after I woke up, unbearable. I have no idea what's going on, and I'm scared out of my mind, so I tell my parents. Our first guess is appendicitis, so my mom rushes me to the ER, and on the car ride there, I'm writhing in pain, crying. No matter how I sit or how I press my side, the pain just continues to escalate. I get to the ER, and they don't take me right away. And in the waiting room, I'm throwing up into a bag from the pain and apologizing to a couple next to me in between bouts of dry heaving and vomit. I'm finally taken in, and they take me to get an ultrasound like 10 minutes later, but I can't stay still when the technician is taking it because of the pain. I eventually stop even attempting to cooperate and demand pain medicine, and when it's put into my IV, it took like 10 minutes to lay there and breathe and feel better. It felt so nice to not be in extreme pain. Anyways, I had a kidney stone. A tiny little kidney stone made me think I was dying, and was genuinely the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. I remember asking my mom on the car ride over if I was dying, because we had no idea what it was and why it was only getting worse. It's a genetic thing for me, but if you're reading this, drink water. A lot of times we get the medical ones, and I'm trying to think as I'm reading it like what it could be. I got this one right, but only because I had an uncle who passed one, and it was pretty bad. I've heard some women say that passing a kidney stone was worse than giving birth, so yeah, drink water. Years and years ago, went on a 911 call for an overdose, arrived on scene to an open door. 0 police department response because they had no available units. So we looked in and saw a young male not breathing on a couch with his sharp literally on the floor next to him. Takes us seconds to confirm basically it's a heroin OD. We start to breathe for him essentially, and at that time, as EMTs, we weren't allowed to carry Narcan. So as my partner comes in with the gurney to move this guy over, his roommate runs in with a pistol and just is yelling and screaming that they didn't do drugs and that he'll effing kill us if we say he did or tell anyone that he did. So we're basically shitting ourselves at this point. Thankfully, a PD unit had cleared their other call and made their way over just as we were getting on scene, and we just didn't know because they arrived and got this guy's attention and ended up shooting him when he pointed the gun their way. We ended up pronouncing the guy who pulled the gun on scene, and the original OD patient was transported and he ended up being fine. Scary shit. Made me completely rethink how I ran calls from then on out. When my lung collapsed the first time, spontaneous pneumothorax, and I staggered over from the pool I just closed down while working as a lifeguard to the manager's office to collapse on his couch and ask him to call 911. I remember my vision going black around the edges as I walked the couple hundred feet or so, as the pain stabbed into my chest and neck like a knife. Never felt such pain before or since. Got hauled off in my first and only, so far, ambulance ride. It happened 4 more times after that, and hasn't happened for about 12 years now, so I got pretty used to it eventually, to the point where I walked into an urgent care and told them my lung collapsed yesterday and sleeping it off didn't work. The doc didn't believe me, and then apologized for not believing me after seeing the x-ray. He said I needed to go to the ER right away. I stopped to get Wendy's on the way, and then finally got the chest tube and multi-day inpatient stay I'd been trying to avoid. That was the last, and hopefully final, time. I was 24 and stupid and slept with my roommate. She started treating me like shit and gaslighting me, so I told her ex that she was sleeping around while they were trying to get back together. When the roommate found out, she jumped me in my room and started choking me. I smashed a lamp over her head, but it didn't faze her. She then got off me and went downstairs. I went to the bathroom to check my face because I was bleeding. Before I got to the bathroom, I saw her coming up the stairs with a big knife. I was like, oh shit, and ran back to my room and tried to close the door. But she got her arm in there. I'm trying to close the door on her arm, and she started smacking me on the head with the knife, saying, "Don't you effing call the cops." I was like, fine, just don't kill me. She pulled her arm out. I closed the door and locked it. She grabbed my phone and went to her mother's house. She was very mentally and emotionally abusive, so in my opinion, she had it coming. But yeah, that shit got effed real fast. My girlfriend and I were walking to our car parked a few blocks away from where we had been hanging out around 2 a.m. in Brooklyn. Streets were deserted of people and cars. Suddenly, this minivan with 2 men in the front seat start driving on the street parallel to where we were walking. One of the men yells something out to us, don't know what it was, but it sounded threatening. One of my friends says we should just continue walking. Hopefully they will leave us alone. I start panicking and say they're not going to do that, we should run. The car picks up speed and makes a sharp turn onto the corner the direction we were heading in, and my friends and I immediately made an about face and started running in the opposite direction. As we ran, I pulled out my phone and called 911. I unfortunately did not even have an address to give them since I was unfamiliar with that area. So all I could say was I was in so-and-so neighborhood with some friends and 2 men in a minivan were chasing us. The operator asked if they should send police out. I said I was unsure since we were running and they didn't seem to be running after us. I eventually told them we are fine and I will call back if we need anything further. We ended up crouching behind some cars a block and a half away from where we had been chased. One of my other friends called the guy whose place we had just left to ask him to come get us and walk us to our car. He ended up coming with his roommate, another-ish friend of ours. We had the audacity to make fun of us and trivialize how dangerous the whole situation had been for us. He can be very misogynistic. I do not know what would have happened if we had not been able to run away. I'm just grateful the men in the van did not chase us after on foot, since none of us had any way of protecting ourselves and there was nowhere to really run to. After that incident, and a couple of other unsafe situations, I carry pepper spray everywhere, and I stay completely aware of my surroundings. I also always take people up on their offer to walk me home or accompany me when going places at night. Mostly I just don't go out late at night anymore. I have no idea what those guys wanted, and I don't want to know. I'm just grateful we were safe at the end of it, but I don't know if I've ever felt true fear for my life like that before. Not even a week ago, actually. I was in a real bad space mentally and just felt a desire to get out of the house and head to the nearby bridge. I wasn't thinking, and before I knew it, I was standing near the railing, staring at the water below, and had the feeling that I should climb over and just dive off. And it wasn't until I lifted my foot off the ground and placed it at the base of the railing that something mentally pulled me back as I stepped away from the railing and just sat on the floor and cried. I was so scared that I almost took my own life. I have people in my life that I know love me, people who would miss me, and some people who might never know what happened to me. I know this, but I was in a strange, instinctive state of, I want to stop feeling like shit, and almost died that day. I've already spoke with my doctor, and am soon going to be speaking with my therapist, so you don't need to be concerned for me. I'm getting help, but talking about that helps keep it in my mind and reminds me of how real that was, because I don't want to forget something like that, so I never come even close again. Well, coming from a complete stranger, if you ever even hear this, glad you made the choice not to jump too. So hopefully you're getting the help that you need and continue to enjoy life for what it is. So good luck. When I got run over by a Zamboni. Used to throw shorts to the crowd at a semi-pro hockey game when I went to college. Showed up absolutely blitzed. The regular Zamboni driver was gone, so it was a sub. Got hit by the Zamboni from behind, and instantly it became an Austin Powers situation. While on the ground, I looked back, assessed the situation, and tried to get up several times, but, ice. Waited until almost my entire body was underneath it so I could brace myself against the tire with my forearm, then managed to fish myself out. I remember the entire audience in absolute effing shock. I think they yelled at the driver, but the sub had no clue what was going on. Got taken back to a room right after and was let go. I was leaving Dallas, Texas to go home after visiting family there. As I'm navigating the nightmare that is getting on 30 East out of there, I swear my car went invisible. First, the large van decided to merge into the right lane just as I was merging onto the freeway. I was shaking and had a death grip on the wheel after that. Not 10 minutes later, I'm merging again, and a semi pulls the same trick the van did. That only nearly gave me a heart attack. I was on the verge of tears, but had to do my best to hold those back because I was driving full speed down a freeway in Texas. It took probably half an hour of driving on less congested roads to bring my heart rate back down and allow myself to loosen my grip on the steering wheel. I make that drive a few times a year and still have issues when navigating through the hell that is actually getting out of Dallas.